What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Sideline Success Academy. Today, we're going to talk about 7 ways that you can create more accountability within your youth football program. So before we begin talking about the 7 different things, I want to say that these are things that I didn't come up with originally. I either stole from other coaches or I had seen used in programs that had been underneath someone, and then started implementing within my own program to help kind of create a sense of accountability within our youth athletes. So the very first thing that I would highly recommend is creating squads. Now, by squads, I mean dividing up the groups into separate lines and creating names for them. Generally, it goes along with the mascot or the team colors, but just giving them a sense of identity as a group. And then once you've done that, you can kind of create different ways for the squads to compete, uh, whether that's actual competitions or whether it's going to be things like grades or greatest GPA. But the squad division kind of helps attach players to people that they don't normally associate with. So we all know that athletes kind of have their own cliques per se, people that they hang out with outside of sports most of the time. And when you start doing squads, you force them to kind of create relationships with other team members that may be outside of their clique group. All right. And so once you've kind of created your squad, you can keep building on that by making and electing leaders. Now, something that I would recommend doing is you select the first leader, and then that leader has to choose their successor. So while making this video and editing it, I realized that I didn't talk a whole lot about the election process. While I do let the kids select, they actually give me 2 nominations, and then I will pick the one that I think is the best for that leadership role. So even though that they select the 2 nominations, they're not allowed to just pick their buddies or their friends. They have to give me 2 people to select from, and then I will pick the person that I think best deserves that role for the program. That way, you're not constantly getting people that are elected over and over because they're best buddies and things like that. You have 2 nominations, you'll select the best one for the fit for the squad. All right. And so you're going to elect a leader for each squad. Boom, boom, boom. Since it's the first one, you can go off of whoever's been the best attendance, most engaged in whatever activities that you've been doing. Okay. Those types of things. All right. And then you kind of let them kind of pick their successor. Now, the leader has important roles because we'll get into this later, but they do have some power over the group. Not as much as you have as a coach, but they do have leadership roles outside the group. So it's important that they understand that the successor they pick is also the person that's going to be taking over that leadership role for their squad. And this isn't something that I would do necessarily in season because there are other things to do. Yes, you can have your squad, yes, you can do competitions and things like that. But this is more of off-season type stuff where we really dive into the squads, platoons, and different things like that and focus on them. All right. So we've divided our squads, we've selected a leader. Now, what do the leaders should do? Okay. Well, one of the things that I make the leaders do is have consequences for the group. And so what I mean by that is they're going to create the consequences for when an athlete misses practice. Okay. Some of you guys may not agree with that. I don't necessarily look at it as a consequence as much as it is a makeup workout. So they're going to pick the makeup workout for the athlete that misses practice. Okay. They're also going to pick the different types of punishments for when a student gets in trouble in class or the punishment for if grades get too bad, those types of things, okay, all of which is selected by the leader. Now, I can veto or add. So, for example, if they wanted to do 100 yards bear crawls, okay, well, 100 yards bear crawls may not be enough for the punishment that the athlete is getting, okay? And so that's where you can kind of step in and say, okay, well, if they get lunch detention, all right, maybe it's 100 yards bear crawls. But if they're in ISS for 3 days, well, it's obviously going to be more. And you can do multipliers and things like that, just kind of creating it on how you see as a program leader and a coach what you want to do as far as that goes. But definitely having their hand to where they kind of feel like they have some ownership of it And then it kind of helps keep everyone else in line. Like if you're setting the punishment, okay, some of the kids may say, "Oh, well, that's going to be nothing. Coach just think that's just easy." Right? If kids set the punishment, then in their mind, okay, it's worse, right? Because that's a peer selecting that punishment, not some quote unquote old man, right? But the peer selecting the punishment, okay? And then as a coach, you can obviously overrule it, anything of those natures. But by having that do that, they kind of take certain amount of ownership over the consequences, but they also take more ownership over the behavior of their platoons. Like if they get together as leaders and create the punishment, and they recognize that they don't want their squad leaders, or they don't want their squad to be seen as quote unquote bad squad or whatever it is, right? They will take more ownership of the behavior of the squad. Okay. And that's kind of the whole point of the leadership role in the classroom, too, which we kind of get to later on. All right. Attendance consequences are a big deal. I think that you obviously have different types of reasons for missing. Okay. But we all know athletes that regularly miss. Okay. And we want to eliminate that practice. All right. We want to eliminate them from missing practice as much as possible. So there needs to be some type of consequence for when athletes miss practice or when they show up late or those types of behaviors. That is going to create more accountability within your program. Okay. Because they're going to take some ownership of coming to practice and coming to practice on time when they're actually being punished for the behavior. If they continue to get playing time, continue to get reps, continue to get to come in late without any actual punishment, then they're going to continue that behavior. But by creating some type of consequence, you're going to help eliminate some of that poor behavior. Is it outside of their control? Maybe, sometimes, absolutely. We're dealing with teenagers or young men that may not have the access to the resources necessary to get to school on time, get to practice on time. But if you think about how many kids there are on your program, how many of them have vehicles, I mean, seriously, has this kid reached out to another teammate and requested a ride, right? We have certain kids that do live way outside of the district. I know currently we have some that are 45 minutes right down the road. They're like farming boys that don't always have a ride for summer practices. But here's the thing about those types of kids: when they do start showing up, they still owe us for the punishment. But again, going back to that coaching intuitive, right? You may want to modify it a little bit. They're still going to make it up. It may be spread apart across several different days. It's not going to be a one-time deal. They may be doing, for example, like burpee air raid type things. We call them air raids. But every line, they hit their belly, get up, keep running, right? So it's several thousand yards of air raids. Well, they're not going to accomplish that all in one day, but they can spend a large portion of the warm up doing it, maybe some of the endo time, and then come in for teamwork. And then they'll continue to do that for several weeks until they get caught up with all their makeup air raids. That is just an idea. But as a coach, if you continue to have no consequences for lack of attendance, then you can expect that same behavior to repeat itself. Okay. Now, the same thing with behavioral consequences. These are something that may be outside your control in a sense of it doesn't happen in front of you, right? So, what I mean by behavioral consequences is they're misbehaving in class. And we, a lot of times as coaches, only wait till we get emails from teachers or until the behavior reaches a certain point to where they're actually getting assigned ISS or some type of visible consequence, right? And the issue with this is that a lot of times teachers, myself included, we don't like to do the paperwork or whatever it is. Okay, maybe the behavior is not bad enough to assign lunch detention or ISS, and we wait till it boils up to that point to where we actually do it. So how do we handle this as coaches? Something that we've done is create accountability tokens, which we use poker chips. You don't have to use poker chips, but it's like a school mascot and the school logo on the poker chip, and the athletes carry it around. And if an athlete gets in trouble in class, teachers will take them from them. Okay. Well, an athlete doesn't have their token, that's immediately X punishment to receive that token back. Okay, and we use the accountability tokens kind of like as a check-in system too. So like random Fridays, we'll say who has their token. If they don't, then instead of warming up with the rest of the athletes, they're outside doing whatever the punishment is, elected back by the leaders. So you kind of see how the accountability system works within itself, right? So the leaders for this squad, right, for this X amount of weeks, okay, they are picking the punishment. Now we're getting to the poker chip system where everybody in their squad has one, and the leaderships can also take some accountability over that role. So if they know that an athlete is messing up in class, then the squad leader can take tokens from their squad members, right? And this is not something that takes lightly, because what I say anytime that an athlete takes a token is it's going to be ran through me. All right. And if I feel like you've misused or abused your leadership role, then I will strip you of your leadership credentials and we will pick a new leader. So the kids really don't have too much issues when it comes to that type of thing as far as abuse of power, but we do have a lot more of so and so did this in class. But it also gives you a better insight as to how your athletes are acting inside the classroom. And it's a super easy way to kind of heal bad behavior that might be swept underneath the rug. All right. And that's just from feedback that I've gotten from teachers in general. It's not just, me saying this. This is feedback that's happened from teachers. Teachers have loved the poker chip token accountability system. They enjoy it quite a bit. You don't have to do poker chips. You could do like military style dog tags that have the emblem or your logo with the school emblem on it, right? But whatever you want to do, just having something physical to where there's this immediate mental connection where if I have to give this up, I'm going to be punished, right? When kids have that, they have that physical piece where if they know they're going to hand it in to a teacher, they're going to get punished. A lot of times that'll reduce some of the behavior that we see in the classroom. And then, of course, going to the basic type stuff, grade consequences. I think that every good school system, right, has some type of pride within how their program performs as far as grades go. So if you don't have any type of accountability system for grades, I would highly recommend creating one. And so how we do this is we create a certain amount of punishment for F's and D's, and then we check them on IPRs and report cards. And I usually try and just take a glance at certain people's grades, like just making sure that some of my borderline kids are not falling below, and the ones that are behind are catching up, right? So I kind of, as you get to know your kids, as you get to know your athletes, you know who you have to keep a watchful eye on. Certain kids, you'll never have to worry about their grades because they're going to consistently be good grades. But other kids who may struggle more academically need that extra reinforcement. By having an accountability system in place, you are pushing those kids to perform better in the classroom, whether you realize it or not. Because no kid, wants to admit to having a low grade, right? If they are not, and again, academics is not for everyone. We know that as coaches. There's lots of things that kind of build into character besides being able to excel in those things, but they are important, okay? So just because we can't do them well doesn't mean that we can't perform at our best effort. And I believe that anybody who's actually trying could easily achieve a C or higher. But there needs to be some type of accountability system for the people that are consistently getting Fs or consistently getting Ds to kind of help push them over that margin, because we know that that's important if they do get the opportunity to play at the next level. As me personally, in my belief, I think that they help a kid achieve later on in life. If they do want to go and receive a higher education, they've kind of instilled those habits earlier on to achieve in the classroom. So making sure that we do that as coaches and just kind of reinforcing those positive behaviors of doing the best I can in the classroom, make sure that I'm studying for my tests, make sure that I'm giving my effort. Even if I don't like something, I'm still going to try at it. I don't have to necessarily excel, but I'm not going to fail. So those are just kind of habits that you can create within an accountability system of just having it for grades within a grade accountability system. Now, last thing that I want to talk about, this is more focused for your program, right? And it's PPC, which is poor performance consequences. Now, before I begin talking about performance, I want to make a statement. This is not going to be a reflection of how well an athlete performed against someone else per se. So not just looking at, did this person who is 5'9", 200 pounds adequately block the 6'4" future NFL defensive end, but it's more of looking at the technique sides of things, and of course energy, effort, those types of things, but having some type of grading system in place to where we can sit down and have conversations with our kids in the areas that they need to improve on based off of what we see on film or what we see on game day. If you don't have film, you can just talk about it on game day. So PPCs, poor performance consequences, are things that we want to eliminate as coaches. Okay, so lack of energy. If you see somebody who's not actively pursuing the football on defense, or they're standing around on the offensive line, I hate that one, right? But they're not looking to help the team, then that is a poor performance consequence. And if you get enough of those, right, you go outside and either after watching game film on, if you guys do Saturdays, Sundays, whatever it is, but after analyzing it, the kids are going to do some type of consequence. Again, that kind of goes back to the squad leaders. If you have that in place, make sure that you're actively using it, and make sure you're using it for the right reasons, measuring not just how well they executed the assignment, but the small pieces of it to where anybody can be successful in that role, regardless of physical ability. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Like, we are not just grading them on how well they can block that 6'4" future NFL defensive end. We're also looking at them. Did they take their steps right? Did they at least attempt to do their assignment? Did they know their assignment? Was there energy and effort there? And if you do those things and you show them, hey, regardless of how much he might have got past you, you did your job to the best of your ability, and I appreciate you. And I think that a lot of times that can go a long way for somebody who just had a really difficult game. Like, understanding that that person, right, is going to be a phenomenal athlete, but at least you tried your best. And then you just kind of clip up some things that they did really well on as far as blocking that person. Because if you watch a full game and somebody at least tried, you are going to get some good, right? There's going to be bad, right? Especially against going somebody that's phenomenally well. But there's going to be some good too. So just make sure that you give those positive reinforcements along with the work habits that they need, right? So we want to make sure that we're really eliminating the lack of energy, the lack of effort, and then, of course, just missed assignments in general, not knowing what to do. Those are the three big pain points for me. Those are the things that I kind of look for in film. It's not so much like purely like scheme, like how technical were you? It's more or less, did you try? Did you do what you were supposed to do on that play? Or, were you just standing around? A lot of times, if you just look at those three things, you'll actually see people who have a bad habit of standing around. And over time, you start implementing that PPC process, you'll kind of see a lot less of it. Like, they're going to start flying to the football. They're going to start taking more effort and energy to listening at practice time and looking at film and trying to kind of soak it in because they don't want to do that anymore. And those are just some easy ways, 7 things to kind of create more accountability within your system, things that you can do as a coach, but you can also kind of delegate within your athletes, right? And your assistant coaches, you can delegate that to your assistant coaches too. Like, make sure that they're the ones holding the PPC conference, right? So like, offensive linemen are going to meet with the offensive line coach over the things that they did well, the things that they didn't, and then they need to answer to him. It doesn't just need to be me, it can be you guys too. And in that way, we kind of develop a network of accountability within our whole system, from athlete to athlete, athlete to coach, athlete to head coach to assistant coach. But we have this system of accountability to just kind of create a stronger connection with each one of our athletes, each one of our coaches. And over time, it can kind of really impact the culture in a positive way. You're going to have kids act up less in the classroom. You're going to have kids more engaged during film study or during board talk, okay? And just over time, it's going to create a really large positive influence for you and your program. So hopefully you got something out of today's video. I hope that you were able to take something away, and hopefully you'll be able to implement it in your program and create a better program. Thank you guys so much for joining us on Sideline Success Academy. Until next time. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Faith, Family, and Football. If you got value from this episode, make sure to subscribe so that you never miss a new drop. And don't forget, head over to SidelineSuccessAcademy.com to grab your free ebook, The 10 Things to Know Before You Start Coaching. And this applies to all coaches. Plus, for all my football coaches out there, you can grab my full 3-4 defensive playbook. And right now, you can save $10 with the code PODDISCOUNT10 at checkout. Again, that's PODDISCOUNT10. Thanks for hanging out with me. Stay strong in your faith, lead your family, and coach with confidence. Catch you next time.